Severe weather is returning to the forecast today across portions of the Central Plains, where we have a threat for damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes possible. We can see on this map a lot of energy is starting to stream back north into the Central Plains, giving some of the ingredients for some of our storm fuel. In addition, we have a bunch of moisture. Look at these rich dew points streaming into Nebraska, Kansas, dew points in the 60s to even 70s. This is more than enough for some storms to initiate and potentially strengthen to strong to severe levels. So this will be a pretty considerable day for severe storms. We definitely want to be on guard for some damaging winds, large hail, and prepare ahead because some of these storms will be pretty nasty when they move through. We're also tracking a bit of a flood threat developing and looking a bit longer term into the forecast for the next week as to what other weather hazards we can expect. Today is Saturday, June 20th. We have an enhanced risk of severe weather. So today in the weather world, let's dive in so you can prepare for these storms later today. So let's just start off the bat with our severe weather risk. Here is our enhanced risk of severe weather. This is a corridor with the greatest coverage and also the greatest intensity of storms as possible. Much of Kansas, southern Nebraska, and eastern portions of Colorado. The slight risk extends a little bit further into Wyoming, a little bit further into Nebraska as well as Kansas, with the marginal risk extending all the way back into portions of Utah and Wyoming. So if you're in these regions, especially in the yellow and the orange shades, we want to be weather aware for any Saturday afternoon and evening plans. You could be dodging some pretty big hailstorms, some pretty big gusty winds, torrential rainfall, and then also a few tornadoes are possible in this region. So this is all possible later this afternoon and evening. We also have a secondary severe weather risk along the Gulf Coast where we have a bit of energy, a lot of tropical moisture linked to some downpours, so some gusty winds possible here, but the bigger threat is definitely going to be across the Central Plains for today. The tornado risk is nothing crazy, but it is definitely noteworthy. So especially if you're in this brown shade, that's where a slightly higher chance for a few tornadoes are possible. And then if you're in these hatched lines, that's where we could get a stronger tornado. We can't rule out an EF1 and EF2 plus. So not a tornado outbreak by any means, but we definitely want to be aware because one or two of these tornadoes could catch you by surprise, and you definitely want to have your tornado plan ready. By far though, the bigger threat will be wind, especially in this red shade. That's where the higher coverage of wind will be. And again, these hatch lines, this means 75 plus mile per hour winds are possible. This is enough to fly things around in your backyard, also enough to cause some power outages. So we want to prepare for that possibility. And then the hail threat's a little bit further to the west, but there is definitely a threat for some not only big hail, but very big hail, very large hail in this hatch block lines where we could get 2-inch or greater hail. That's about the size of hen eggs or bigger. So we have that severe risk today. Tomorrow, notice how everything shifts to the south and east. This is as our storm system shifts a little bit further to the southeast, and we have a cold front that will be moving into portions of the Central Plains, interacting with a lot of that energy and warmth. So we're talking about a pretty big slight risk from Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, portions of Arkansas, and into the Kentucky region. This includes Cincinnati, St. Louis, Kansas City, Wichita. If you're in any of these cities, prepare for some severe thunderstorms as soon as Sunday morning, but especially later on Sunday afternoon. It is Father's Day, so if you're in this region, unfortunately, you might be dodging some severe storms for any Sunday afternoon Father's Day plan, and it might be a good idea to get an indoor backup just in case. Once again, we have a slightly heightened tornado potential across portions of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, especially in the Hatch Brown area. This does include St. Louis and Bloomington. Y'all are kind of in the bullseye of this threat. This is where ingredients are a little bit more favorable for a few more numerous tornadoes, maybe a few strong tornadoes, and it is possible that we get somewhere in this region another upgrade to a 10% tornado risk. This brown shade is 5%, so we could get slightly more confidence somewhere near St. Louis, maybe to the north and east where a slightly heightened tornado potential sets up. We'll show you the models in a second. So those are some pretty significant risks of severe weather. We also though have some pretty significant flood risks over the next few days. First of all, just hugging the Gulf, we have a pretty expansive flood risk. We still have a lot of moisture. Tropical Storm Arthur that moved through recently kicked up a lot of moisture that's just kind of lingering in this area. So some numerous showers and thunderstorms could be briefly heavy. What I'm watching though is this red area. This is a moderate risk, a 3 out of 4 risk from the Weather Prediction Center for excessive rainfall from Kansas into Nebraska. This is a 40% chance of seeing flash flooding near where you live, which is pretty significant. Not only flash flooding, but more significant flash flooding is possible. If you're near creeks, rivers, flood-prone areas, definitely make sure you're paying attention to the weather for some of the flash flood alerts. And then look at this, on Sunday, Father's Day, the flash flood risk expands. Now most of central Missouri, including Kansas City and St. Louis, extending into Illinois and Indiana, but the slight risk is also pretty large. We have one over South Dakota. The other slight risk across the central region of the country is pretty big, encompassing many states and many big cities. So we could have a bigger impact flood day on Sunday. Again, it's unfortunate that it's Father's Day, but always remember to turn around, don't drown, and just keep an eye on the radar for some of the potential flood alerts, especially in some of the creeks, rivers, and flood-prone areas. So let's play the model out to track the various threats. First, I just want to draw your attention down to the Gulf Coast. This is why we have that flood risk across portions of the deep south today, just look at the slug of moisture. A lot of showers, downpours, and storms in this region, and the soil is just so sensitive. In some spots, we had 2 feet of rain over the past week from Tropical Storm Arthur, so it's really not going to take much more to flood. Backing up and moving further to the north, we're going to be quiet through about noon. It's as we get into the afternoon hours. This is when some storms start developing. We're initially going to be watching a few supercells forming across western Kansas along the dry line. So this is really when our tornado risk is highest, as well as the threat for some pretty large hail. Look at some of these supercells exploding across portions of western Kansas into Nebraska. We could have a few more showers and storms further to the north form over Nebraska and Iowa. Some gusty winds, large hail definitely possible in this, and then just a broader area of rain over the Rocky Mountains that'll be sliding to the southeast through the evening. So notice how these supercells are going to quickly merge into this big blob of rain. This is actually a mesoscale convective system, MCS, that's expected to form over this region. All this means is this is kind of an organized cluster of thunderstorms that'll be moving to the southeast. So with this system, the threat for tornadoes does go down. It's not zero, but it's definitely lower. But within here, we could have some pretty gusty winds and some large hail embedded. Especially though, as the evening progresses into the overnight, I expect an increasing wind risk with this area of storms. Also, a pretty big heavy rain risk. This is where that moderate risk of flooding comes in. Look at how concentrated we just have these areas of heavy rain slowly moving to the southeast. This means areas could be under these heavy storms for several hours in a row, and that could quickly add up and quickly lead to some flooding concerns. So a pretty messy overnight of rain moving into Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri, sliding generally to the east-southeast as we go into Sunday morning. So more heavy rain, a few gusty winds, a few large hail, especially on the southern side of this complex as we go overnight. Now waking up Sunday morning, it's going to be a wet start. The mesoscale convective system is not going to die anytime soon, so a large area of thunderstorms and rain showers still over some portions of this region. And notice on the southern end, we could still have some strong to severe storms, some gusty winds, large hail, even a few tornadoes as early as Sunday morning. Now this system will eventually peter off as it moves to the east. Still a few damaging winds possible within that as it goes into Illinois. What we're watching though for our main severe weather risk Sunday is the afternoon redevelopment of some showers and storms. Now in particular, this region across Missouri into Illinois, north of St. Louis, this area does have a slightly heightened tornado potential. This is where we could be seeing that 10% tornado risk. I would definitely be saying weather aware Sunday afternoon across this region for not only a few tornadoes, but maybe a few stronger tornadoes possible. Now as we go later into the forecast, we kind of have this line of storms back building. A few more supercells are trying to form across Kansas and Nebraska like they did Saturday. We could still have some instances of large hail, gusty winds, and maybe a few tornadoes in here. Everything will continue advancing to the southeast as we get into the overnight. If you have any Father's Day dinner plans, definitely plan ahead for some rain potential with this whole line that's looking pretty extensive now from Kansas, Missouri into Illinois. So some pretty nasty storms moving through here, and then everything will slowly continue sliding to the east. We could have another pseudo mesoscale convective system form across portions a little bit further east into Kentucky. It looks like this could try to organize into a complex of rain that moves south. So in these regions, definitely prepare for some overnight storms, and then waking up Monday morning, we could be looking at a pretty wet start Arkansas and then across portions of Tennessee and Kentucky as well. So that covers the severe threat pretty well. The other thing we're tracking though is also the heavy rain threat. And those moderate risks of rainfall again are pretty significant. One of the reasons why is we have so much moisture in the atmosphere. Look at this big plume of moisture. This is not just moisture at the surface, but moisture that goes through the whole column in the atmosphere. So any rain that forms will just wring all this moisture out really efficiently. For perspective, some of these numbers here near 2 inches for our precipitable water values, that's near or greater than the 99th percentile of moisture for this time of year, climatologically speaking. So this is very anomalous. All this is going to be translated into rain, and some pretty heavy rain, especially with that complex that's moving further to the southeast. So the ingredients are definitely there in the atmosphere for some heavy rain setting up, and I am pretty concerned about the threat for some flash flooding. None of the models are going to be perfect at pinning down where these streaks of heavy rain sets up, but we could have some of these streaks where we get 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in some of these colors. Could be near Omaha. This could shift a little bit south, a little bit north. So bottom line is we know the heavy rain is coming, especially if you're in that slight to moderate risk. Make sure we're taking some of those flood precautions, because these will be some pretty big gully washers, and it could be raining extensively over the same areas for many hours. Alright, let's take the forecast a little bit longer term, so that's the next few days. Going into Monday, we do have a pretty broad marginal risk of severe weather all the way from Colorado and Texas into portions of the mid-Atlantic. This will be along a cold front that will be continuing to slide further to the south and interacting with a lot of moist air ahead of it. More details definitely to come on Monday's risk. It does look like a slightly higher area of severe weather will be possible across the plains, but we're a little bit too far out for some of those specifics. Taking a look at the forecast, so I do want to go beyond the next few days and just look at this whole week ahead, what this work week looks like in terms of weather, because a bit of a different weather pattern is setting up. The past few weeks we've had some pretty active severe weather. We've had some of those outbreaks across portions of the Midwest with a pretty active jet stream. For this this upcoming week, we're gonna have a pretty big ridge of high pressure building across the western US. So what this means is the west is gonna heat up, it's also gonna dry out. This is also gonna push the jet stream further to the north with some slight dipping across portions of the eastern US, and it's gonna bring winds anywhere east from the Rockies in the upper atmosphere, more from the northwest. So we'll have these winds kind of sliding down. This is a pretty typical summer weather pattern, but what this is gonna do is this means any storm complexes that form, they're gonna quickly move to the northwest and kind of slip and slide along that jet stream and all that upper level winds. There's not gonna be one big storm system that barrels through. Instead, there are gonna be these tiny mesoscale ingredients in the atmosphere. Mesoscale just means small scale, so it could be leftover storms from previous days, just daytime heating. They're gonna spark some showers and storms. We could have a few complexes move, but anything that forms will likely move to the southeast, and it's possible with any of these storms that we could see some gusty winds, large hail, some severe weather is possible. It's just really hard to predict given the mesoscale nature of the environment. If we can get any of these clusters, any of these mesoscale convective systems like we have tonight, and sliding to the southeast pretty quickly, we could get some pretty extensive damaging winds in this region. So that's kind of the focus. So no big scale weather system, but just these tiny mesoscale features that could dictate some rain chances and some severe storm chances through the week. We'll kind of have to go day by day with this pattern as to which areas are most favored for some of the severe storms anywhere east of the Rockies. Now by next weekend, it looks like we could have more of an organized storm system develop, maybe a more concentrated cluster of severe weather across portions of the plains, but this is pretty far out, so a lot of uncertainty and low confidence on this right now. With this weather pattern, we're also tracking some heat across the west and some cooler weather actually for portions of the central and eastern US. The big ridge of high pressure means sinking air, compressing air, and that heats things up. So some hot temperatures, a bit of a heat dome across the four corners into portions of the mountains in the west. But notice by contrast, some of this cooler air coming into the northern and central US, it's gonna feel pretty pleasant for summer standards. We're gonna have highs in the 70s and 80s, which is definitely really nice. Maybe a slight drop in humidity as well. So prepare for the heat if you're in places like Vegas or further south, Phoenix, even California. We could have areas well into the triple digits. Portions of the valleys, we could be looking at temperatures in excess of 110. So heat wave in the southwest, but also even in the northwest. Portland, you could be at 90 degrees later this week. Seattle, you could be in the upper 80s near 90. By contrast, look at this. Places around Chicago, we could be in the 70s for highs. On Tuesday, widespread 70s, even some 60s for high temperatures. That's gotta feel really nice for June standards. Still pretty hot and humid along the south, along the Gulf Coast, but definitely enjoy some of these cooler afternoons and some cooler mornings. It could be pretty refreshing in the 50s and 60s. You might need to bust out a light jacket for some of the morning hours. It's only gonna get hotter from here. We still have a few months of summer left to go, but we'll definitely take any of these cooler stretches as they come. So that's all for the weather world. We're mainly focusing on that enhanced risk of severe weather today, and then that slight risk of severe weather tomorrow, as well as that flooding risk, especially in those moderate areas. If you're in any of those zones, make sure you have plans in place, safety measures. Just keeping an eye to the sky, especially for any outdoor activities this weekend. Other than that, I hope we can enjoy some quieter weather, relatively speaking, throughout the next week. We'll have those mesoscale details to figure out, but at least some cooler air will be coming in for much of us in the central and eastern US, so that'll feel pretty nice. It looks like our next big weather maker will probably hold off until next weekend. Thanks so much for watching. If you never want to miss an update in the weather world, consider subscribing. Otherwise, hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.